All right, hello and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming out. We're going to take the next hour and we're going to talk to you about monitoring the health performance of your vSphere environment. We're going to talk about doing some capacity planning as well as some efficiency optimization using vCenter Operations Manager. So by way of introduction, my name is Kyle. I'm on the technical marketing team at VMware. I've been there for about 4 years. And I work on the group that oversees the vCloud suite. And with me is Ryan. He's one of our TAMs. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi folks, my name is Ryan Johnson. I'm a staff technical account manager based in Orlando, Florida, and I help a lot of enterprise customers deploy and operationalize a software-defined data center in Orlando, Florida.
All right, great. So we're going to jump in if the pointer works. All right, there we go. So standard disclaimer here. We will have at the end of this presentation a bit of a sneak preview on some future stuff coming, so just keep the disclaimer in mind. We will be showing you some futures, and the disclaimer will apply to those features. And it appears as though the remote's not working, so. All right, so the way I want to do this is how many people here use vCenter Operations Manager today? Okay, a good number of you. For those of you that don't, what I thought would be good is we're going to start out with a demo up front. And what I want to do is I want to show you what vCenter Operations Manager looks like and how it works in the sense of using it to manage my virtual infrastructure. So what I have here is I have a couple of recorded demos I'm going to go through, and we're going to go through 3 different scenarios. So the first one here, I want to talk about using vCops, vCenter Operations Manager, to troubleshoot a performance problem. So the first thing I want to point out here is we're using the vSphere UI. So vCenter Operations Manager comes with 2 UIs in a sense. There's the vSphere UI, which we have here. There's the custom UI. So if you're using the custom UI, this may look a little bit different than what you might be accustomed to. But we've logged in here. We're at the home screen. And what we can see here is we're looking at our world view. So we're seeing the overall environment. And you'll see nothing really stands out right now. We've got our badges there, our health, risk, and efficiency. We've got a little bit of risk in the environment. You see the color coding. And what we're going to do is let's go through a role play scenario where let's say we're sitting down at our desk. We're looking at our dashboard. Nothing really stands out. But somebody calls us on the phone. And they say, hey, my virtual machine is slow. Okay. So what's your virtual machine name? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type it in up here. So we're doing a search for WL Win7 VM1. And we do a search for that. And what you'll notice is the dashboard updates because the tree is expanded. I'm now looking at the specific virtual machine. I'm now looking at the health, risk, and efficiency in the context of that single virtual machine. And the first thing that we notice here when we look at this is that the health score is 54 and it's yellow. So that is not green, and that is kind of supporting our theory. You know, what the customer's telling us is, hey, I've got a performance problem. And so right away, we've got confirmation that what that customer is telling us appears to be true. You know, a lot of times when customers call and report problems, our first thought is, okay, is it really slow or do you just think it's slow? Well, we've logged into vCenter Operations Manager here, and we see underneath that health badge, we have that health trend, and we see in the last 2 hours, there's been a significant drop in health. So something's going on here. So let's go ahead and investigate this. So the way we can do that is we can go ahead and click on that health badge. And when we click on the health badge, it will come to the operations details view, and here we see the health badge together with its 3 minor badges. And those 3 minor badges, workload, anomalies, and faults. So we look at the workload, we look at the anomalies. Anomalies are a measure of how normal it's performing, and any faults, and those come together to give us our health score. And if you'll look there, we see those badges, and you'll look on the right, we see that 43, and what stands out is we know that this virtual machine is CPU bound. So we've gone from, okay, VM slow, to, yep, you're right, it is slow, to, hey, this appears to be a CPU problem, with just a couple of clicks. In addition, something else that stands out is you'll notice that we have in the anomalies, there's a recent surge in the number of anomalies. And that surge in anomalies corresponds with this drop in health. So I'm able to start doing some correlation here. I'm able to see, hey, something must have happened because about the same time the anomalies shot up, my health dropped down. So what's going on here? Now at this point, I have a slow virtual machine. It's complaining about CPU. And there's no faults on there. I just want to point that out. But at this point, you might ask yourself, is this a virtual machine problem or is this an ESXi host problem? You know, am I looking at the symptoms of a host contention problem So what is the health of the host? What's the health of other VMs on this host? And we can find that out very easily just by scrolling down. And when we scroll down, we're going to see the health of the host and its other VMs. So as soon as this thing catches up. There we go. And so we see down here that the health of the host is normal, and the other VMs appear to be primarily green. So this doesn't appear to be a host problem. This looks like it's a VM problem. So that's helping us guide us in our troubleshooting. So let's go back up to the top now, and let's actually go into a little bit of detail. We know it's CPU bound, so let's go ahead and do a double click on that workload badge and get more information about. And here you'll see something stands out. We see the green bar here, which is our demand, and we see the gray bar, which is our usage, and we can see that the virtual machine is demanding more CPU than he's getting. So he's being throttled. Okay? So that's interesting. And we also, if you'll recall, we noticed there were a lot of anomalies. So let's go to the anomalies badge and let's see what the anomalies have to say. So if we go there, we know we're CPU bound, so we'll expand out the CPU related sections. And what we see is just confirmation here. Yeah, CPU ready time's up, CPU throttling's up, CPU usage is down. So what happened? Well, let's go to the Events tab, and here you'll see a history of events over time. And if you look at the events over time, what we see here is on the right side, you're going to see there's a spike in events that happened recently, and right before that we have several red badges there. Those are event overlays. And if we click on the most recent one, what we can see is it's going to highlight down there, and it's probably hard to see on the screen, but essentially what we've done is we've identified that somebody went in and put a limit on this virtual machine. So what I've just shown you is we went from a phone call to, hey, something's slow, to immediate confirmation that something's amiss, be able to drill in, identify the CPU-related problem, confirm it's a VM specific, it's not related to the host or other VMs, go in and actually get it down to root cause analysis just by a few clicks using the vCenter Operations Manager. So obviously there's a lot more tabs in there, a lot of things I didn't cover, but that's just a real quick example on using vCenter Operations Manager to do some basic health and performance monitoring, as well as some troubleshooting and root cause analysis using the tool. And so with that, I'm going to actually switch over to another demo. And this time I want to talk about capacity. So how many people have ever been asked a question by their manager or by somebody on their team, hey, how many more VMs can we handle before we run out of capacity? You know, it's a big question. And a lot of times the way we answer that is, well, you kind of guess. And wouldn't it be nice if we could make that decision based on some sound data that we could trust? And that's exactly what vCenter Operations Manager is going to do. So this time what I'm going to do for this demo is we're going to expand out our world tree. We're going to actually expand out the tree, and we're going to drill into a cluster. So you'll see here in this lab, I'm monitoring 3 vCenter servers. I go into my TMM Gold Labs, and I go into my management infrastructure cluster. Again, the badges update, I'm now looking at this in the context of the cluster, and you'll see I have a high risk score. So what does that mean? Well, if I go to that Y is risk 96 and I expand that out, you'll see that it's going to show me time remaining and capacity remaining and stress. And you'll notice time remaining is 0. It's telling me I'm already out of capacity. If I scroll that down further, you'll see that the capacity remaining is telling me that I'm actually oversubscribed in this cluster. I'm actually oversubscribed by 6 virtual machines. Okay, so at this point, what I want to do is, okay, how do I address this capacity? Well, I could add 1 host, I could add 2 hosts, I could add 3 hosts, but what is the optimal, what should I do? You know, how do I go through and figure out what I should do? Well, we can do some capacity planning by simply clicking on that capacity badge, that red 0 next to capacity remaining, and it will take us to our planning views where we can look at the virtual machine capacity. And here we see, and if we look in that where the red is, it's telling us we're out of memory CPU. Scroll down, you see we're oversubscribed by 6 virtual machines. So what I want to do now is go to this link that says create new scenario. And this is where I can go in and basically say, hey, I'm going to create a scenario. I'm going to simulate making a change. And then I'm going to see how that change would affect my environment based on the data that VCOps has collected. So we go ahead and click on that. And what we're going to see is a widget pops up. And it's going to give me an option. I can add host and data stores, or I can add virtual machines. So let's go ahead and add 2 more hosts to this cluster. So I'm going to go up and click on the host and data stores. And then when I add the host, it gives me the option to specify how much CPU, how fast those CPUs are, and how much memory I'm going to add. So I just go in, I say I'm going to add 2 hosts, I give it the specifications, make sure you click save when you're done. So 2.67 gigahertz. And I'm using the same specs that I have for the existing host in the cluster. If I'm adding different size hosts, I could obviously use different values. So we've done the first host, now we'll do the second host. Okay, and then we'll save that. And then when we go next, it's going to ask us if we want to add any data stores. Now, if we were having some storage contention, maybe I would do that. But this example, I'm not going to add any data stores. I'm just going to go ahead and click next. I'm going to get a summary, and I'm going to go ahead and click finish. And you'll notice what happens is in that planning view, it updates, and now I see 2 columns. One column is showing me where I'm at today, oversubscribed by 6 VMs. And the other column is showing me where I'm at after I make this change, what it's calling hardware change 0. And you'll see I go from being oversubscribed by 6 virtual machines to having enough capacity to not only account for those 6 virtual machines, but to create an additional 4.7 virtual machines. So maybe I might want to consider adding 3 hosts or 4 hosts, and I can go in and I can update this, and I can look and see how these different scenarios will play out. Okay. Now, in addition to be able to just go in and add hosts, I can also create a second scenario. So let's say I've done this, and then the boss comes in and says, hey, I need 2 more VMs provisioned ASAP. Okay, well, how's that going to affect my planning? So I go ahead and go to another launch new scenario, and this time I'm going to add virtual machines. So I go in, I add a virtual machine. Now, when I add the virtual machines, you'll see here it populates the values for me, but it gives me the option to override it. So I can specify how much CPU, how much memory, how much storage the virtual machines are going to have. And on the right-hand side there, it actually calls out profiles. And you'll see it has a small, medium, and a large profile. It's actually auto-populating with the default, which is a medium profile. And essentially what that is it's basically saying, based on the VMs I've deployed, these are the typical configurations. So I can go in and specify, I want to add 2 virtual machines with a specific workload, or I want to add 2 virtual machines that fit in the medium, the small, the large. So I can specify kind of the attributes of these virtual machines when I add those. And so by default, we're going to use that medium profile. And then here I just go ahead and I'll go ahead and click next. Apply that. And then what you'll see here is it adds a scenario. Now one thing you'll notice is it's giving me the current standing oversubscribed by 6 VMs. If I add 2 hosts, I have enough capacity for 4.7 VMs. Or if I add 2 VMs, I'll actually be oversubscribed by 8 VMs. So it's doing an OR here. What I want to do is combine these. I want to say, what if I take add 2 hosts and I add 2 VMs? So what I do is I go up and instead of comparing these, I'll just drop down and I will combine these. And you'll see it will combine those 2 scenarios into one scenario, and then if I scroll down, it will show me that, hey, if I do this, I'll go from being oversubscribed by 6 VMs to having enough capacity to have an additional 2.7 VMs. So that's just a real quick example of some of the capacity planning capabilities. And keep in mind that these capacity planning numbers are based off of the data that VCOps has been collecting over time. So it's basically going in and saying, I know your environment, I know how you stand. If you make that change, this is how it will affect your environment. Okay, so that's 2 down. We got 1 more to go. And this time I want to talk about efficiency. Okay, so again, we're going to go into that world view. We're going to expand it out. And this time we're looking at that efficiency column. Okay, so go into the world view, we expand that out. Go into our TMM Gold Lab vCenter, and we're going, this time we're going to do our management BCA cluster. And you'll notice here that the efficiency is 0. So I have a very inefficient cluster. If you look at those numbers, I have a lot of waste in there. And waste in terms of CPU that's allocated, memory that's allocated that's not being used, VMs that are idle, snapshots that are sitting out there. So it's identified to have a lot of waste. And if I scroll this down, you'll see it breaks that waste out into vCPUs, storage, and memory. And it kind of gives me some numbers and how much I can reclaim. If I scroll that down further, I have density. This is telling me how I'm doing in terms of my consolidation ratios. And it's going to break out that density in terms of VM to host, vCPU to CPU, as well as virtual memory to memory. So it's giving me kind of a quick insight into how I'm doing. So obviously I have a very inefficient cluster here. I have a lot of waste. So I want to clean this up. So what I can do is I can go up, click on that efficiency badge, and it's going to take me over to the planning tab, and this time I'm going to filter based on waste. And you'll see here my virtual machine optimizations. It's giving me a summary of the type of virtual machine it's giving me a summary of the optimization opportunities I have before me. It's telling me the total number of virtual machines. It's breaking those down by powered off virtual machines, idle virtual machines, undersized virtual machines, oversized virtual machines. So I've got visibility into kind of where I'm at. Now, if I want to go into additional detail, I can go and click the different views. So here I can go into idle virtual machines view or oversized virtual machines view. I guess is what we're going to go to, the oversized virtual machines. Okay. All right, when we go in here, you'll see I get this table, and underneath it tells me what's the recommended number of CPUs versus how many CPUs have you allocated. So it tells me the configured versus the recommended. And you'll see here I'll have an example where I have a VM configured with 8 vCPUs, and it's telling me it only needs 1. Okay? So I'm able to use this to go and identify those virtual machines where I can do some right sizing. Now, how many people have ever tried to go in and talk to some of the application owners about, hey, I want to right size your VM, and they put up a lot of resistance because they insist their VM needs 12 gig of RAM? Okay, so that's a problem. But you know what? You're looking at factual data. You can go to them and say, hey, you've been running this for a year, and look, vCops is telling me you don't need it. And to kind of help make it easy for you to kind of have that conversation and to go in and have that right sizing discussion, we also make it very easy. This is going to show the idle virtual machines as well, but we also make it very easy to go in and generate reports. So I can go in and I can click on the Reports tab. It's supposed to click on the Reports tab. There you go. So click on the Reports tab, and you'll see I have a number of out-of-the-box reports. And in those reports, I have the ability to go in and look at oversized virtual machines, idle virtual machines. I can run that report, and when I run it, it's going to print out a nice report. I can look at that in a PDF or a CSV format, and I can take that report and I can go out to my boss, I can go out to the VM owners, and I can basically use this as ammunition to kind of help say, hey, I'm not just guessing here. I'm showing you that, hey, you're not using it, and hey, yeah, with virtualization, we can right size you later on. So a lot of capabilities here. In terms of, we just went through 3 scenarios. We went through performance scenario, a health monitoring, troubleshooting, a capacity planning, and efficiency optimization. And so with that, we want to now move over, and we're going to ask you the whole questions to the end just so we can stay on schedule. By the way, there are 2 mics here, so when we get to the Q&A, please do use the mic so everybody else can hear. And so now what we want to do is I've shown you vCops, I've shown you hopefully the value of vCops, I got you excited about it, so I'm going to hand it off to Ryan now, who's going to take us into, okay, so what is vSphere with operations management and a little bit about the packaging. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Kyle. So who here knows what vSphere with operations management is? Raise your hand. All right, so we often go out in the field and we talk to customers about vCenter operations and vSphere, but a lot of times folks just don't know what vSphere with operations management is. So they know what naked vSphere is, but we want to demystify what vSphere with operations management is exactly. The clicker doesn't work, so. All right, so what is vSphere with operations management? So everyone here knows what vSphere is. It's sold in specific editions, Standard, Enterprise, Enterprise Plus. We take these editions of vSphere that you know and love today and the features and capabilities that come with that edition, and we actually couple that with vCenter Operations Manager Standard. This gives you everything you need in order to do performance monitoring, manage health, manage efficiency, and do capacity planning within inside your virtual infrastructure. And together, these constitute vSphere with Operations Management, vSOM. It gives you operational readiness dashboards, provides you the ability to look at the health, the metering, and performance of your virtual data center. It gives you the ability to look at that efficiency and the risk. How much time and capacity do I have remaining? Is there stress in my environment? Do I have the right density ratios in my environment? Together, these 2 products are vSOM. Now, you might ask, there are multiple editions. There are 3 different editions of vCenter Operations Manager, a Standard, an Advanced, and an Enterprise. So you ask the question, well, if I'm getting Standard with vSOM, what am I missing? So there is an add-on that you can actually get with vSphere Operations Management, vSOM. It's the Advanced add-on. And what it provides you is the delta between the Standard edition and the Advanced edition. And a couple key things it provides you are the ability to do compliance reporting on your vSphere host. It gives you the ability to look at dependency mapping. And it also gives you the ability to look at OS performance management. All right? So if you want to look at the add-on portion, you can contact your preferred partner, check on the link. It's very detailed and provides you more details about the advanced edition. But be sure, the standard edition provides you everything you need in order to manage the health, performance, and efficiency of your vSphere environment. So how's it licensed? Well, if you know how to license vSphere today, you're well on your way to be an expert at licensing vSphere, vSOM, because it's one single license key that activates both products. One license key. These are separate installs, but it's one license key that licenses the entire substrate. So it activates the addition of vSphere you want, as well as vCenter Operations Manager. There are no limitations on the mount, so everything is licensed on a per host CPU. Right? The socket inside that host. You license it just like vSphere. There are no limitations on the number of virtual machines that run on that host. There are no limitations on the number of cores on that socket, and there are no limitations on RAM. One single key that you can apply to your vCenter, and it licenses all the products. Separate installs, one license key that licenses the entire substrate. There's a white paper that covers all the licensing, packaging. It's about a 10-page white paper, or 11 pages if you count the blank page at the end. But that gives you everything regarding the facts and the licensing, packaging. Check that out. It's vmware.com/go/vsom-licensing. So how do you move from vSphere to vSphere Operations Manager? So there's basically four steps. The first thing is to obtain your license key. Right? You go out to my.vmware.com. You're going to acquire that license key after you've ordered it from your reseller or your partner. You're going to acquire that license, a 25-character key. Again, it licenses both vSphere and vCenter Operations Manager. The next step is going to be to configure your network settings. So if you're used to the C# client, a lot of people haven't gotten used to the web client yet. This is the concept of adding an IP pool at the data center object level. The vCenter where you want it to deploy vCenter operations. If you're using the web client, it's actually known as a network protocol policies. But essentially the same thing, network protocol policy or IP pool, depending on which client you're using. When you do this, you're actually going to set up some specific information to prep the environment for a vCenter Operations Manager. The first thing you're going to do when you create the IP pool is you're going to add your IP space. You're going to add your subnet mask. You're going to add your default gateway, and you're going to pick the network or networks in which you want to actually deploy vCenter Operations Manager. But also ask you, do you want to enable this IP pool? And you do not enable the IP pool. Right? So three specific informations: the IP space, the subnet mask, the default gateway. You'll add the network that you want the vCenter Operations to land on, and you will not enable the IP pool. So the next piece is actually to deploy the vApp. How many people here know what a vApp is? Fair number of hands. So if you don't know what a vApp is, think of it as a logical construct. Right? A logical construct of one or more VMs that actually create an application set. Kind of like a resource pool, in that it gives you the ability to set resources and limits and shares, etc. But it actually can do a lot more. It can set up the startup order of the app. It can set the shutdown order. And when we deploy vCenter Operations Manager, the vApp, we'll actually ask some metadata questions. So we'll ask, what do you want to name this vApp? By default, I think it's vCenter Operations Manager is what it calls it. You can name it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It's just a container. It's going to ask you, do you want to do static or DHCP? And I encourage you to use static IP addressing. Once you do that, it's going to ask you, how big do you want this to be? We'll talk about the deployment models. So you want small, medium, or large. We'll talk about that in the slides to come. It'll also ask you, what are those IP addresses for the two VMs that actually constitute vCenter Operations Manager? And you'll deploy the vApp. We'll walk you through the vApp deployment in just a moment. And once you deploy the vApp, the next stage is actually to actually configure your vCenter servers. When you deploy vCenter Operations Manager to your vCenter, it's going to register that first vCenter. But you have additional vCenters, and once you want to ingest the data, the performance data, you can add additional vCenter servers from the administrative interface. And the key thing I want you to know is that vCenter Operations is extremely intelligent. It has the ability to learn about your environment. It ingests all kinds of data from vCenter Server, your performance, your task, events that are happening real time. It's smart. We apply patented analytics and learn what's normal in your environment. And the key thing is we learn about what's normal. So immediately, you saw the dashboards that Kyle showed you. Immediately, we begin to get information on the health and the performance of your environment. Not only the vCenter, but the hosts, the clusters, and the VMs that are actually running on the platform. We understand the health, the performance, the metering, what's happening, what are those tasks that are happening, do we have any concerns? And within 1 week, we begin to get information on the waste and the density. Do you have oversubscription? Do you have over-provisioned VMs in your environment? Do you have under-provisioned VMs? Do you have those zombie VMs that are sitting there idle because someone forgot about the project or never went forward? A test machine that you happened to deploy long ago and forgot about. We'll be able to find those out within 1 week. And if you give it a month, we'll begin to get information regarding capacity. How much time is there remaining? How much capacity is there remaining? Is there stress in your environment? The key thing is the longer you let it run, the more information we're going to ingest, and the more we can do with that. Now, in a proof of concept environment, these numbers are going to be shrunk, right? And in production environment, we encourage you to give it about a quarter in order to determine capacity. But if you're in a proof of concept environment, you can shrink these numbers a little bit and just kind of get a feel with it. So how is it distributed? So the vCenter Operations is just distributed as an OVA. An OVA, which you can think of as everybody out here know what an OVF file is? Open Virtualization Format? That's how we actually distribute it. So it's the metadata component that actually defines the characteristics of a virtual machine. And then you have, in an OVA file, you think of it as a tarball of the OVF, the VMDKs, and the constructs of a virtual machine. We actually can ingest this OVA file and distribute the application. We apply all the metadata. So when you actually deploy the vApp, we're going to ask you for specific metadata. Again, the IP addresses, the configuration, the name. We're actually going to distribute 2 virtual machines. The first virtual machine is the UI VM. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the user interface VM. This VM has basically 3 roles. 2 roles in the vSphere Operations Standard, and 3 in the Advanced Edition. The first role is going to be to run the admin interface, the admin web app, where you actually go and configure the administrative interface for vCenter Operations. The second is going to be the vSphere UI, the user interface to actually get into vCenter Operations and manage it. And if you happen to be running the Advanced Edition, you actually have the custom web app, the custom dashboards area, if you have the Advanced Edition. The second VM is the Analytics VM. It's the brain trust. It's the VM that actually pulls all the metrics and data from your vCenter server servers. It's going to ingest that information. We're going to apply the patented analytics, and we're going to learn what's normal in your environment. This actually ingests all the data into a file system database, and then takes all the performance information and ingests that into a vPostgres database. That's its role. It's the brain trust. And when you deploy it, the 3 deployment options are asked during the deployment of the OVF. That is, how big do you want it to be? I like to say it's small, medium, large, baby bear, mama bear, papa bear, but you have the small. So if you've got around 1,500 VMs or less, you're going to pick the small edition. If you've got 3,000 VMs, you're going to pick the middle edition. And if you have more than 3,000 VMs, you're going to pick the large one. And these are just basic recommendations. We've put a lot of effort to look at the sizing and where vCenter Operations, how vCenter Operations VMs should be sized. These are general recommendations. This is not to say you can't shut down the vApp, adjust the memory and CPU to fit your environment, and then restart it, and the vApp will actually restart in the appropriate order. So deploying the vApp. A lot of folks haven't gotten used to the vSphere user interface. So in the Actions tab inside the vSphere web client, you're going to go to deploy OVF file. You're going to point that to the OVA file you download from my.vmware.com. You're going to point it to that OVA file. Once you do that, it's actually going to ingest that file, and it's going to ask you a couple questions. Again, it's going to ask you, what do you want the IP addresses to be for this for this appliance. What do you want to name it? What data store do you want to put it on? What cluster do you want to put it on? And it's going to ingest that, and then it's going to deploy the app based on the metadata that you've provided. And you can see here, we've got the vApp running. And underneath that is a UI VM and the analytics VM. And the app is running. We've started that application up in the appropriate startup order. We've actually created an open VPN between the two VMs. So once you have deployed the vApp, if you recall the IP address, and hopefully you've created a DNS entry for the UI VM ahead of time, you can actually go to the /admin, go to the IP address or the namespace of that VM, and go /admin, and you're actually going to configure the appliance. And this is important. You need to go here to configure a couple things. You want to configure your SSL certificates. You want to configure your SNMP, your SMTP, so you can get alerts. You're also going to want to go here if you have additional vCenters that you want to collect information from. You can also use this interface to stop the services and restart the services if you need to, or change the profile from basic to full profile depending on the amount of data that you want to actually ingest from your vCenter servers. So why do you need vSphere Operations Management? Why do you need it? You've got vSphere today. What's it going to give you? You've seen some of the demos. You've seen the demos that Kyle showed you at the beginning. But why do you need it? So this is kind of a crude graph, but what it illustrates is a workload. And if you look at it, around Tuesday evening, I think it's Friday evening up there, there's a bump, there's a spike. It's about 90%. And I ask the question, is this a problem with this workload? In fact, there's not enough information there to tell us if that's a problem. The typical monitoring systems, elemental-based operating systems, the Generation 1, Generation 2 monitoring systems, have the concept of setting these manual thresholds. So if you were using a standard monitoring system and that hit 90%, you might be out to dinner with your wife, your significant other, maybe you were already sleeping, and you'd get paged, you get called. There's a problem with the VM. But really, is there a problem? And I contend that you need to actually take a step back. If we looked at trending for that workload, take a step back for a couple weeks and look at it, we see a nice sine wave. Nice, easy sine wave. It's not to say there's no possible issues in the future. There might be some stress on the VM, but that's normal behavior for that workload. Maybe there's a backup job running. Maybe there's a batch job running, but that's normal. And those elemental-based monitoring systems would alert you and say, there's a problem. And you really wouldn't see the signal and the noise. You wouldn't really understand the context. And I'll draw an analogy. So I'm a runner, and I run about 5 to 6 miles every day in the Orlando, Florida heat, right, between 12 and 1 o'clock. So when I go for a run, what happens? First thing is my heart rate rises. I begin to sweat. It's Florida. My breathing may become labored. Well, that's normal behavior. That's normal context for me. But if I'm sitting at home with my wife watching True Detective on TV, and suddenly my heart rate rises, suddenly I start to sweat, my breathing becomes labored, she'd look at me and say, what the heck is wrong with you? That would be abnormal behavior, right? We need to find the signal in the noise. We need to find the context. And here, we need to look at the context. So here for this workload, if it looked more like this, at the 50-40% range over a couple weeks, and then suddenly in the third week, it spikes to like 90%, we know that's not normal. That's not normal behavior. And that could be a problem. And that's something we care about. Not the 90% spikes that happen on Tuesday evening and Thursday evening. We care about this here. This is abnormal behavior. So find the signal and noise in the context. So why add vSphere with operations management? So on the screen, you see what I arguably is a classic 1982 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. A pony car, muscle car. A great platform, lots of horsepower, a fun car to ride. Very powerful, right? It's kind of like vSphere, right? Kind of like vCenter server in ESX, right? It's got some nice gauges and dials that tells you how fast it's going, how much gas is in the tank, what's the oil pressure, what are the RPMs. But that's about it. So I say this is kind of like vCenter server in ESX. It doesn't have the idiot lights to say, you've got something's wrong with your oil, right? Or you need to go check, you get the check engine light. It doesn't have that. And so what I like to say is this is a lot like vCenter server in ESX to a degree. A great platform, a pony car, but you need something a little more than that. And I say you need something more like Darth Vader's bathroom here. We know what that is? That's Kit. Right? Still, underneath, that is still a 1982 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, but it's been souped up. You have all the nice gauges and dials. And the point of this is it's there to actually protect you, the driver. It's there to protect you and understand what's happening. The holistic monitoring, understand across your entire infrastructure, from the platform, the vCenters, the ESX hosts, the clusters, the virtual machines, how are things running today? Is it normal? What do you need to take into account? Are you efficient? Is there stress in your environment? Do you have enough time remaining based on the types of VMs you're deploying? Do you have enough capacity for the next workload or project that comes across your desk for your manager and says, I need this tomorrow? Do we have enough capacity? Or you get that question to say, hey, based on the trending that we have, how many more VMs can I deploy? Right? Do I have waste? So it's very intelligent. This is vCenter operations. So health, risk, and efficiency. You've seen the dashboards. And there's so much information. You can go out to YouTube. There's some amazing blog posts by David Davis. Anybody know who David Davis is here? In Pluralsight, does train signal training. Amazing blogger. He's got great posts about all the badges and health, risk, and efficiency. We're going to dive into those just a little bit. So health. It's real-time visibility. How is my infrastructure running today? Is it healthy? Are there things that I care about? How's the workload running? Are there problems with anomalies that are bubbling up? Are there faults being fed from vCenter? Did I lose network connectivity? What events are bubbling up? It's got integrated smart alerts and proactive smart alerts. And by proactive, we understand ahead of time based on historical context what's actually happening, and we can predict what happens. We can create smart alerts. And risk. How much time do I have remaining based on the types of VMs I'm deploying, the size of those VMs? And how much capacity do I actually have remaining if that project comes across my desk, which it eventually will? And efficiency. Identify the provisioning, right? Look at the over-provisioning and underutilized workloads. Like Kyle said, who here hasn't had someone to say, look, one of the first things you see when you deploy vCenter operations and you let it run for a while, you start looking at these reports, and you see all these VMs that are oversized, way oversized, because someone recommended, yes, I need 32 gigs of RAM and 8 CPUs for a single-threaded application. There's no point. When it might just need to be a one-by-one, right? I see this all the time, and really what it helps you do is really find that Goldilocks zone. Where do your VMs need to be? What's the right size? What's just right for those virtual machines? What's your VM to host ratio? Do I have the appropriate mapping for what's my virtual CPU to P-core ratio? What's the number of VMs that I have mapped to my host? Am I efficiently using those resources that do cost money and providing the optimal performance for my machines? And what I actually contend is take it a little bit backwards. Because I often look at workloads and say, sky's falling, you're over-provisioning workloads. I actually like to look at it differently and look at workloads that the business is running on and say, what workloads are under-provisioned? Because those could be revenue-generating applications, things that could be critical patient care. And look at those workloads and say, what's not running efficiently? And let me help those. And maybe get that good grace with the business unit to actually reclaim resources from the other VMs. All right? Take Peter to pay Paul, if you will. So this is the dashboard, the comprehensive operations dashboard. You saw this in Kyle's demos. And what I want to draw your attention to, and Kyle did mention it, in this screenshot, you actually see we're focused on the world view on the far left. Right? If we actually change our focus and context, to a different item, say another vCenter here, the badges change. Right? If I go down to a data center object level, the badges will change. If I go down to a cluster level, the badges will change. Down to a host, down to a VM, the context of what I care about, those badges will change. And here you see green means good, yellow means there's a warning, orange means you might have a problem, and red means you better, well, stop and figure out what the heck's going on. Right? And you'll see the heat map, right? There's a heat map down below. You can quickly identify what's going on based on the heat map. Click on the red, click on the orange. It could be a host, it could be a switch, it could be a virtual machine. Find the context in the noise. It quickly helps you find it. And you also see the minor badges. And David Davis, like I said, there's some great YouTube videos that go out there. But you actually see the minor badges. Under health, you'll see workload. How hard is that object working? How hard is that host working? How hard is that VM working? You'll see anomalies. Are there some weird things happening in the environment on this object level? You'll see faults. Faults are things that are bubbling up from vCenter, right? Errors, right? Something shut down, you lost connectivity on a switch, those will bubble up. And then under risk, you're going to see time remaining. You'll see capacity remaining, and you'll see stress on those environments. You'll also see efficiency, right? Do I have the right density ratios? And I like to kind of put this in context. We'll do in just a moment.
We need to kind of hurry up a little bit.
Yeah. So health are things you actually immediately need to take care of. When you log into the operational dashboard, focus on health. This is what you actually need to take care of immediately. These are things that are going to affect your workloads at that moment in time. But you can look at the other items, such as risk and efficiency, as future things. Right? If you're not looking at how much capacity you have remaining, you're going to have issues. Not enough capacity, not enough time, you're having stress in your environment, you're going to begin to have issues. And efficiency, let's start looking at waste. You can also look at the reverse order. Right? If you actually are proactive and you start looking at the efficiency, you start right-sizing your VMs, you start looking at idle VMs, over-provisioned VMs, you're going to begin to understand how the environment's configured. If you improve the efficiency, you're going to reduce the risk. And if you reduce the risk, you're going to increase your health. It's like if you don't eat well, right? If you eat too much, you eat too little, right? You're not eating efficiently for the fuel that you actually need, right? You do that, you're going to increase risk on your body, right? You're going to increase your stress. And if you increase your stress, you're not eating well, you're going to cause issues with your health, and you'll be more likely to get injured. I take that as from being a runner. So vSphere Web Client, vCenter Operations. If you log into the vSphere Web Client, you're going to see the vCenter Operations icon. And if you click on this icon, you actually have a couple cool options. You actually have the ability to also deploy vCenter Operations by clicking on here and actually saying deploy vCenter Operations. But I do say there's a caveat. In some environments, if you don't have DNS configured appropriately or you've got blocked ports, it will fail. So typically, I recommend, like we showed, you deploy the OVA file. So if you click on that, you can also open up vCenter Operations Manager. Now here, if you're in the vSphere Web Client and you have context on any object, a vCenter, a host, a cluster, you're going to notice if you have vCenter Operations Manager installed, you're going to start seeing those major badges of health, risk, and efficiency. All right, so down at the bottom you see everything looks good here. Health is good, risk is good, efficiency is good for my vCenter. If I change my context, go down to a virtual machine, go down to a host, go down to a cluster, you can still see the same context. And if you go to that's in the summary tab. If you go to the monitor tab, you start looking into health, you're going to see the health badge and all the minor badges. How is the workload running? Are there anomalies? Or are there faults? And all that will bubble up. And if you do see something that's of interest, up in the top right-hand corner, there's a link. If you click on this link, it's going to take you directly to the vCenter Operations Manager user interface, and it's going to take you directly to that item so you can begin to troubleshoot. So, typically right here, people talk about minor badges, and I don't want to do that right now because there's so many YouTube videos that go into the minor badges, and we did touch upon them. What I want to talk about is something a little more important. Badges are important, right? You need to understand those. But one of the things I find that's very complicated and folks just don't seem to grasp are a couple concepts, and that's what are dynamic thresholds, what are intelligent operations groups, and what are custom policies. And we're going to touch on this. So what's the difference between a dynamic threshold and a static threshold? So vCenter Operations Manager is extremely intelligent. It begins to learn what's normal in your environment. Right? You can draw the analogy to you're driving your car, right? You know, you have a car, you drive it on a daily basis, and you go a certain go a certain distance every day. You know, you fill up every now and then. You know, you change your tires, you rotate your tires. It's kind of standard operating things. You begin to understand what's normal for your environment. It's kind of like OnStar, right? Anybody got OnStar? It knows if I got the right tire pressure, when I need to have service, it alerts me for all those details. It learns what my normal driving conditions. And every time I call Geico, they say, how far do you drive? Right? When do you do these activities? Well, in the gray box here, this is the dynamic threshold. Right? On my management BCA cluster, I can actually tell that the dynamic threshold for vCenter Operations has identified my typical CPU usage is between 10 and 40%. Right? It's learned what's normal, what's expected behavior in this cluster. Now, if there's a little blip down here, a little spike, that's within normal range. Would I want to get an alert on that? When I want to get woken up in the middle of the night or get paged when I'm out with my wife, I don't use pagers anymore, but you get the gist. But up here, that's outside of normal range. Maybe that's something I care about. Maybe that's something that is an anomaly, right? One blip might not be a big deal, but it's something I care about. And if I start to see lots of anomalies, then I really do care about that, and that's when I want to take action, not that small spike that happened at the bottom. So another concept is that inside your environment, I contend that not all objects are created equal, right? In that you likely have different types of workloads. You may have production workloads, test, development, staging, crash and burn, lab, whatever, bronze, silver, gold, but they all need different things and have different requirements. Traditionally, if you use an element-based monitoring systems, you're going to be configuring these based on, oh, these are going to spike at 90% or 85%, send me a warning, send me an alert. It becomes very tedious if you have 100, or if you have 1,000, if you have 10,000 workloads. So not all objects are created equal, right? Different types of workloads. So here, policies are the policies give you the ability to define what are the thresholds at which you want to switch, change the badges of health, risk, and efficiency to the different colors, right? And begin to do the alerting, right? When do I want to be green? When do I have a warning, need to go yellow? When does it need to go orange? And when do I want to report a problem, right? What about my usable capacity, right? Usable versus physical capacity. If I want to take into consideration high availability, maybe I want to ensure that I only have a certain amount of usable capacity than going up to my entire physical capacity. What about overcommitment? Do I want to overcommit in my environment? Is that important? Do I care about overcommitment? Right? And when do I send alerts? When do you want to get a notification? When do you want to get woken up? Or what do you want to get woken up for? So not all objects are created equal, and different workloads require different policies. So what's important is to know is that when you deploy vCenter Operations Manager, it creates a default policy, a single default policy. What we encourage you to do is actually take that default policy, copy it into policies that make sense for your business. Perhaps create one for production, one for test, development, or whatever the types of workloads you may have. And then set the settings that are specific to that environment. So always group the objects, ingest those objects, and create those workloads and apply those specific new policies. So here's an animation, right? When you deploy vCenter Operations, you get the default policy, right? And this default policy here says, you know what? Yeah, we want to do overcommitment. We want to take in high availability into consideration. We want to look at VMs that are idle 90%, is identify those as idle VMs. Those are the zombies in our data center. And then alerts, by default, let's alert on everything. So if we apply that on all the objects, you can see the problem. Right? What if those are production workloads, test workloads, or development workloads? So no matter what kind of workload you have here, the default policy is going to alert, it's going to give you overcommitment, it's going to apply HA, and it's going to contend that any workload that's idle 90% of the time is an idle workload. And that may not be what you want in your environment. So how do you correct that? You're going to create groups. Right? You're going to create intelligent operations groups based on the type of workloads. And you can create these groups based on maybe naming conventions, right? Locations, whatever data you want to ingest. And so in this instance, we create a group for production, we create a group for test, and we create a group for development. And then we apply those groups and ingest the VMs that are relevant to those workloads. And now our production policy. I have a lot of customers that say, you know, in my mission critical workloads, I absolutely don't want any overcommitment. And I want to ensure that I have enough availability to fail over, whether it's inside a cluster or fail over one zone to an entirely separate zone on the other side of the data center. I'll look at idle VMs. The VMs that are idle 90% of the time, I want to identify those. Those are my zombies. No one's using them. And yes, I absolutely want to be alerted. Those are the VMs I care about. But if you look at test and development, maybe I absolutely want to overcommit in my development environment, in my test environment. Maybe I don't care about HA in my test and development environment. Alerts, absolutely not, right? They're test, they're development. I had a crash and burn lab, I don't want to get alert. I don't want that default policy waking me up and bothering me. It's noise, right? We're trying to find that signal in the noise, find what matters. So the point here is we encourage you to use the intelligent operations groups and create custom policies for the types of workloads that you have in your environment. We want to stress that. And now the next thing we want to do is actually hand it back over to Kyle, and we're going to talk about some technical previews that are coming in the next release, or maybe coming in the next release, I should say.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, so we've seen VCOps. This is as of the 5.8 version. So if you're running 5.x, that's the UI you're going to have as far as the standard edition. And so what I want to do is I just want to kind of show you some things that are coming, kind of get you excited for what's coming in the next version. So I want to start, here we're seeing a list of alerts. So how can we make this list of alerts better? So what if instead of just telling you that there is a problem, I told you, hey, there's a problem, and here's some ideas on what you might be able to do to fix it. So what if I gave you some recommendations, and in addition, some actions that you can take? So here's a screenshot, a similar screenshot from what we're working on in the beta. And you'll see here that the problems are now based off of symptoms. So we have many symptoms, and those symptoms come together to create a problem. And if you look over there, you see that we actually have recommendations that are on the bottom. So with this symptom, this problem develops because one of those symptoms gets triggered. Then down there is telling me, hey, you can virtualize you can vMotion some virtual machines, you can power off non-critical virtual machines. In addition, I can go in there and click that power off button. It will pop up a window, and I can go in and say, hey, I got some test VMs running on this box. Let's go ahead and power those off and correct that action. So the introduction of this idea of using symptom-based alerting, providing recommendations, and even having some built-in actions is going to help make VCOps a lot more valuable to you. Okay. So in addition, we have the ability to go in and define custom alerts. So here's one I did in my lab. So I basically went in and said, hey, I want to know if anytime a host CPU utilization goes above 50% and it's in a cluster, the DRS is turned off, I want you to send me an alert. Because maybe I was doing maintenance, I forgot to turn DRS back on, or if DRS is off, I got host CPU usage increasing. I'm not going to have DRS moving VMs around in order to avoid contention. So that's the one I created. So I had the ability to go ahead and create this, and if we break this down, you'll see it's basically made up of a couple of symptoms. It's basically looking to see if DRS is enabled in the cluster. And it's also looking to see, hey, if you have a host that has high CPU usage, that's defined as CPU at the immediate level, which is, this current example, the host is up to 97%. And you'll see down there the recommendation is to, hey, go enable DRS on your cluster. So if I have a junior admin who sees this alert, goes in and clicks and says, oh, what do I do? That recommendation will help steer them in the right direction. Okay, we did some capacity planning earlier, and we had a view that looked like this, where we went in and we looked and we said, hey, I'm oversubscribed by 6 VMs. I want to go in and add 2 hosts. We can go in and do that, but I don't have the ability to kind of save that and comply it. So what if I say, okay, on October 1st, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to purchase those 2 virtual machines and apply it. So if I do any additional capacity planning from here on out, I want you to account for the fact that I have those 2 additional hosts in there. There's no way to apply that planning once you've done it. If we go to the beta, what we see here is a similar view where I have the projects. We now call each capacity scenario a project. And you see down there I have multiple projects. I have 2 selected. And you'll notice they have a different state. And if we look at that, I can put them in a planned state. I can put them in a committed state. And they can also go into an expired state. So I have the ability to save that. I can do the capacity planning and say, okay, I'm going to add 2 more hosts to this cluster. You know what? Commit that. And then any future capacity planning I do is going to be based on the fact that those 2 hosts are coming. So it helps me to be able to save those projects. And this is something that's a direct result of feedback from the users from vCenter, VCOps 5.7, 5.8 is, hey, we want to be able to save these capacity planning scenarios. So this is what we have now in the beta. Okay, the last thing I want to show you here is custom reports. So in 5.x, we have a very finite list of reports, and it's not really customizable. If you get some of the higher editions, the Advanced Enterprise, there is some ability to go in and do it, but it's not easy. But with the beta, we're now giving you the ability. You'll see there you have that plus sign, that edit pencil, so you have the ability to go in and create your own custom reports. So that helps you be able to take the information you're looking at in the UI and put that into a report format that you can then print out every week, take to the boss, or you can do and get that information without having to kind of transpose that over to Excel spreadsheets and make those types of graphs. So just a couple of quick examples of some of the things we're doing. If you come by the booth, we can go into a lot more detail on these. This is just showing you an example of the type of report. The report's a very official, professional-looking report. And that wraps us up. So we got a few minutes for some Q&A. We got 2 mics here. If you want to stand up to the mics, or if you want to shout out, I'll try and repeat it. We got a few minutes. Yeah, right here.
When you do scenario number 2, you take into consideration scenario number 3 that you have VM that are over.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, so he's basically saying when you go through the different scenarios, you have one scenario. Does the second scenario take into account the first scenario? And the answer is, if by default, no. By default, it's an or situation. Create a scenario. Yes. So if I go in, my risk is high, and I says, hey, you're out of capacity, but I go into the efficiency and I see I got a lot of oversubscribed VMs. Yeah, the first step is to go in and right-size those VMs to free up that capacity, and maybe you can fix your capacity problem without having to add additional hosts. So that's part of the efficiency optimization. So yeah.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. It's very enlightening.
Thank you.
You've stated in your presentation that you can hook in multiple vCenters.
Uh-huh.
What limitation? How many?
I'm not sure of a limitation. I don't know if there's a number or not.
Okay, so I can just...
Yeah, it'd probably be like the release notes or something.
Because I have an example for you. Okay, say I have 12 vCenters, 8,000 VMs.
Uh-huh.
I've got customers that have more than that.
Yeah, so vCops is based on number of objects more so than number of vCenter servers.
Gotcha. Okay.
So when you have those models about small, medium, and large, that's all, sizing's all based on number of objects.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I'd also encourage you to, when you in the admin interface, is to select the basic profile versus a full profile, because if you have a lot of vCenters coming in, you're getting a lot of data and some data that might not be needed. It's going to really make it more efficient and reduce your IOPS.
Okay, let's jump over here.
Yes, if you have resource contention and you get alerts when you, will it include recommendations for DRS sensitivity?
making any recommendations on changing that, or is it just on the individual resource?
Yeah, so right now it's just making, you don't, in the beta, when you get the recommendations, those are just based on VCOps. So like that custom alert I built on the DRS, it doesn't look at DRS. VCOps doesn't natively. You have to kind of do that.
Okay.
So if you're getting alerts because you got high CPU utilization, it's not smart enough to go in and say, but if you turn DRS on, move things around. It's just basically saying, hey, you got high utilization. The recommendation would be for you to get involved, turn DRS on if it's off, I think.
Right.
But it's not taking that into account as part of the alerts.
Okay.
Okay? Over here.
What if you know that a server has a whole bunch of CPU spiking and you know it's inefficient, but the only thing that vSOM sees is peaks all the time and it considers it normal? How can you fight to find out if that's actually, or prove that's inefficient?
Yeah, so if you have a workload that's just choppy and it's always choppy, vCops are going to learn that and say, hey, it's always choppy, that's normal, so I'm going to put a green and say that's normal behavior.
Could be stress.
So you can look at the stress. You can also go into the policy settings, so you can customize, are you looking at available capacity versus usable capacity, and you can maybe look at some policy settings to see if you couldn't trigger that. But yeah, that's something I'd probably direct you down to the booth, to the vCops booth, to see if they could help you out. That's maybe a level above me.
And when you change policies, do you have to wait a whole analytics cycle again for it to update?
Yeah, when you change policies, it will kind of start over. And so when with the efficiency and risk, I think it collects every 24 hours. Okay. Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Shut down and go outside. Okay.
So I guess they're telling us we got to go out. So if you want to come up to us, we follow you out. We'll stand out here in the hall and answer questions. Back a slide.